break something wide open for you, something you've been misunderstanding for a long time. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, most people assume it's because they've lost interest. They think if they loved me, they'd be closer. If they cared, they'd want more connection, not less. And that's exactly where the pain multiplies, because you're interpreting their distance through the lens of your emotional logic, not theirs. But here's the shocking truth. Their withdrawal isn't a lack of feeling. It's a flood of emotion they don't know how to regulate. This is where everything changes if you can grasp it. Avoidants aren't emotionally empty, they're emotionally overloaded. Their entire nervous system is wired for survival, not connection. Somewhere in their early story, childhood, relationships, betrayal, they learned a devastating lie. Intimacy equals danger. So what do when love starts creeping in? They shut the gates. They retreat. Not because they don't love you, but because they're terrified of what that love could do to them. See, for most of us, love is supposed to feel like home. But for the avoidant, home was chaos, judgment, pressure, or silence. So when affection shows up, real, raw, consistent affection, it doesn't feel warm. It feels threatening, like a fire alarm going off in a quiet room. Their system says, get out, shut down, escape before you're exposed. And here's the twist that will shake your core. The deeper they feel for you, the harder they fight themselves not to run. We think distance means disinterest, but for the avoidant, distance is a shield they've spent their whole life crafting. That shield protects them from the fear of being vulnerable, of depending on someone, of trusting another human being with the most fragile part of them, their heart. So when they ghost, when they get quiet, when they seem emotionally absent, it's not always rejection. Sometimes it's the loudest cry their silence can make. I'm feeling something. I don't know how to process it. Please don't hate me for it. This is where empathy and clarity have to collide. You don't chase them. You don't beg. You don't become their emotional crutch. But you understand, you take their behavior out of the category of punishment and move it into the category of self-protection. Because it is. Psychologically, this isn't about coldness. It's about dysregulation. Avoidants have what therapists call deactivating strategies. That means when intimacy gets too real, they subconsciously trigger behaviors to kill the connection. They pick fights, they disappear, they criticize. Why? Because they're not actually trying to destroy the relationship, they're trying to destroy their own vulnerability. It's their defense against emotional exposure, and ironically, it's proof that they care. Now, I'm not saying tolerate emotional abuse. I'm not saying wait forever or excuse every shutdown, but I am saying this. If you misread the language of avoidance, you'll miss the quiet ways love is being shown. And sometimes the strongest act of love an avoidant can perform is pulling away before they drown in their own feelings. It's twisted, it's painful, but it's real. That space they create, it's not always meant to disconnect from you. Sometimes it's their desperate attempt to reconnect with themselves, to calm the internal storm you accidentally triggered just by loving them too deeply. That's why the avoidant isn't heartless, they're terrified. And if you've ever seen someone freeze when things get too real, you're witnessing a soul trying to protect itself with outdated armor. But here's the call to action for every person listening. Stop assuming that silence means indifference. And stop expecting love to always speak in words. Because some of the deepest love on this planet whispers through closed doors, guarded hearts, and the silence of someone who's still fighting their own past every time you say, I'm not going anywhere. Sometimes the one who pulls away is the one who feels it most. Let me make something clear that most people miss when dealing with someone with an avoidant attachment style. You're not going to get the kind of affection you're used to. You're not going to get the I love you text out of nowhere, the good morning messages every single day, or the hand holding in public that screams you're mine. That's not how avoidants operate. Not because they don't feel. It's because their love language is rooted in action over articulation. They don't show up with words. They show up with presence. And not just any presence, presence when it actually matters. You have to understand something. For an avoidant, saying I love you can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff without a parachute. It's too raw, too exposing. They grew up or were conditioned to believe that vulnerability equals weakness, that expressing needs gets you hurt, that getting close puts you at risk. So they play it cool. They stay composed. They keep love at arm's length. But if you watch closely, if you know what to look for, you'll see the cracks in that armor. Because while they won't shout it from the rooftops, they'll drive an hour out of their way to help you fix something. They'll check your tires. They'll remember how you take your coffee. They'll be quiet in a room, but they'll sit beside you through the worst night of your life without leaving. These are the things that most people overlook because we're trained to believe that love should look loud, dramatic, poetic. But for the avoidant, love is subtle. It's service. It's presence under pressure. This is where people mess up. They measure the avoidance, affection, against a standard built for someone else. And that's like asking a bird to swim. The avoidant doesn't perform love, they endure it. They don't express it with flair, they protect it with effort. And that effort, it's not always romantic in the way you expect, but it's deeply loyal. Let me paint a picture. Imagine you're in trouble. Not emotionally, real trouble. Car's broken down. Emergency situation, you're stranded. You call 5 people, 4 make excuses, 1 just says, "Where are you?" That's the avoidant. No drama, no words, just movement. Because while they can't always say what they feel, they'll show up when it really counts. And if you dismiss that, if you tell yourself, well, they never said they loved me, you're throwing away one of the most real expressions of commitment you'll ever receive. Because they won't say it casually. That's the point. When love feels like danger to someone's nervous system, offering a word like, "I love you," is like handing over a weapon. They're not going to give you that weapon until they know, absolutely know, that you won't use it to hurt them. That's why their actions matter more than their phrases. An avoidant who shows up in a crisis, who fixes things behind the scenes, who remembers the little stuff but says very little about it, that's someone who is loving you in the only way they know how. And you know what? That love might be more real than all the poetic sweet talk in the world. Because when it matters, when it's hard, when everyone else leaves, they don't. You might never get a public love confession, but if you get their consistency, if you get their effort, when you're in the fire, that is the love confession. And that shifts everything. That means you've got to start interpreting love not just through language, but through reliability. Not through flowers, but through foundations. Because some people build love not with passion, but with presence. So here's what I want you to walk away with. Stop waiting for them to say the words. Start noticing how they act when it's hard to love you. That's when the avoidant reveals who they are. That's when their affection becomes undeniable. And that's when you'll see they're not afraid to love you. They're afraid you won't understand how they do. Here's what no one tells you about avoidance. They don't just pull away, they study you. They're hyper aware. Every move, every tone, every shift in your energy gets logged in their internal system. But not because they're manipulative, not because they're calculating. It's because deep down, they're trying to figure out something they've never been taught, how to safely love someone without losing themselves in the process. See, when most people fall for someone, they express it. They flirt, they open up, they lean in. But avoidance, they mirror. They mimic your energy. They start using your words, picking up on your routines, showing up where you tend to be. And you think it's coincidence, right? You tell yourself, maybe we're just in sync. No, they're syncing on purpose. But here's the twist. This mirroring isn't about imitation. It's about regulation. It's a subconscious way for the avoidant to feel close to you without having to risk direct vulnerability. If they copy your rhythm, your pace, your emotional temperature, they can stay connected without ever having to expose the raw, unfiltered parts of themselves. It's psychological armor dressed up as connection. This is the avoidance version of learning the dance of intimacy without stepping too far into the spotlight, because they're terrified that if they move first, if they reveal too much, they'll get it wrong. They'll be rejected, or worse, they'll be abandoned after finally letting someone in. So what do? They watch, they learn, they copy. And if you're not aware of it, you might miss one of the most powerful signs that an avoidant is falling for you. They start to become fluent in your emotional language. If you say something in a certain way, days later they say it back. If you like a certain show, suddenly they're watching it too. If you have a unique rhythm to how you interact, texting, laughing, reacting, they adopt it. Not because they're playing games, but because mirroring you makes them feel safe. This behavior is deeply rooted in attachment psychology. Humans are hardwired to mimic those we feel bonded to, especially when we don't know how to express that bond directly. Children do it with caregivers. Adults do it in relationships. And avoidance, they do it as a way of saying, I see you, I respect you, I'm trying to find a way to exist in your world without losing control of mine. But don't mistake this subtle imitation for shallowness. It's actually one of the most vulnerable things an avoidant can do. It means they're letting you influence them. And that's huge, because avoidants by nature resist influence. They protect their independence like it's sacred. So when they start adapting to you, even in small ways, it's a massive gesture. They won't tell you they're doing it. They probably don't even realize they are. But the moment an avoidant starts sounding like you, showing up in your spaces, responding in your rhythm, that's not random. That's emotional investment. That's connection coded in behavior instead of words. But here's the hard part. If you're unaware, you might get frustrated by their silence and miss the fact that they've been loving you in your language the entire time. Because real love, especially from someone with avoidant wiring, isn't always loud, it's strategic, it's cautious. But it's also incredibly sincere. And this is your challenge. Don't just listen to what they say. Watch who they become around you. That's where the truth lives. That's where their heart is speaking, even if their mouth is silent. So let me leave you with this. When someone begins to mirror your essence, they aren't just imitating you, they're trying to belong with you. And for an avoidant, that may be the closest thing to I love you you'll ever hear. Let's dismantle one of the most misunderstood signals of an avoidant in love. Jealousy. Most people look at jealousy as a toxic trait. They label it as insecurity, ego, even manipulation. But when you're dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, jealousy doesn't always come from a place of possession. It comes from a place of panic. Let me explain. Avoidants spend most of their lives trying not to need anyone. That's their safety zone. The moment they feel themselves getting attached, something in their system sounds the alarm. This is dangerous. You're getting too close. You could get hurt. So they back off, they suppress, they hide behind emotional walls and logic. They try to convince themselves they're fine without you. But the moment they sense someone else might take your attention, the moment they hear you mention another person, see you enjoying someone else's presence, or even witness you being emotionally available to someone else, their mask slips. Jealousy kicks in, but not in the usual way. It's not about control. It's about fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of being truly seen, and then left. See, here's the paradox. Avoidants long to be loved, but they spent so many years arming themselves against rejection that they don't know how to receive it. They believe deep down that if someone sees the real them, the flaws, the inconsistencies, the emotional unavailability, that person will leave. So they stay in control by staying distant. But when someone else enters the picture, when their connection to you feels threatened, something primal awakens inside them. And it's not possessiveness, it's exposure. Because if someone else gets too close to you, that means they've lost their unspoken connection with you. That means they no longer have the upper hand of distance. That means they might have just been outloved. And that, for an avoidant, is unbearable. So what do? They start probing. Their tone changes. They become reactive in subtle ways. They throw in passive-aggressive comments or become oddly critical. Maybe they retreat even more. Or sometimes, if they're brave enough, they might even confront it directly, but that's rare. What's more common is the internal war they begin to fight. Why do I care so much? Why does this hurt? I thought I didn't need this person. That's the turning point. Jealousy, in this context, isn't immaturity. It's emotional awakening. It's the moment the avoidant realizes they're more invested than they want to admit. And not just invested, emotionally dependent on your presence in ways they can't rationalize. And the fear under that jealousy is layered. It's not just fear of losing you, it's fear that you'll discover someone who doesn't have walls, someone easier, someone more open, someone less complicated. In that moment, the avoidant is staring down the barrel of their own emotional limitations. Not only are they afraid of being left, they're afraid you'll leave for something they were never taught how to be. And that's heavy. That's why you have to stop interpreting avoidant jealousy as toxic drama. Sometimes it's the deepest proof they're attached. They just don't have the tools to process it constructively. They won't always fight for you with words. They'll wrestle for you inside themselves first. And you may never see it, but it's real and it's intense. Now, this doesn't mean you cater to their jealousy. It doesn't mean you tolerate controlling behavior. But it does mean you become wise enough to recognize what their reactions are actually rooted in. And when you see it clearly without judgment, you gain power. Power to decide how you show up. Power to meet them with clarity instead of confusion. Power to recognize that the very moment they seem most distant or cold may be the moment they're actually terrified of losing you. So take a breath and reframe this. But avoidance jealousy is not a sign of control. It's a sign they've started to care more than they can safely admit. And when that shows up, they don't need to be punished or chased. They need to be understood. Because sometimes the one who pretends not to notice is the one who's watching the closest. Here's where most people miss the mark when trying to decode and avoid it in love. They keep looking for big gestures. They wait for a dramatic confession, an over-the-top romantic moment, some sweeping declaration that finally confirms, yes, I love you. But that's not how avoidants operate. That's not how they're wired. They don't give you fireworks. They give you quiet devotion disguised as routine. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss what's right in front of you. You see, for the avoidant, love doesn't scream, it whispers. And it often whispers in the form of small, meticulous, intentional acts. They remember your coffee order. They fix your broken charger without being asked. They bring you a snack they notice you liked. They double check to see if your tire pressure is okay before a long drive. They adjust the room temperature when they know you're too cold without saying a word. It's in those details, the subtle, easily overlooked moments, that you'll find their heart speaking. Why? Because those moments are safe, they're low-risk expressions of care that don't require vulnerability in the traditional sense. They don't have to say how they feel, they just have to do something that benefits you. That's their way of loving without getting emotionally naked. But here's where it gets profound. Those small things, they cost the avoidant everything, not in time or energy, but in emotional exposure. Every little act is calculated. It's not manipulative, it's measured. Because to them, offering anything personal is like removing a layer of armor. So when they take the time to meet your needs in those quiet ways, it's not just a favor, it's trust. It's their version of saying, I'm here. I see you. And even though I can't always tell you, I care. Now, let's contrast that with what the world has conditioned us to expect. We're constantly shown that love should be grand, that if it's not visible to the whole world, it doesn't count. That if someone isn't constantly praising you, complimenting you, posting about you, then it's not real. But the avoidance love language isn't about proving it to others. It's about showing up for you in ways that cost them emotionally, but make your life better. That's not fake. That's not distant. That's a quiet form of loyalty most people don't even know how to recognize. And this is where things can get tragically misunderstood. Because if you're looking for validation in words, you might miss the love they're giving through effort. If you need constant affection to feel secure, you might mistake their subtle consistency for apathy. And if you're measuring their love by how expressive they are, you're judging a fish by how well it can climb a tree. Here's the truth. An avoidant who truly cares will show it in the smallest, most consistent ways. And when you start stacking those moments, moment by moment, behavior by behavior, you start to see a pattern of devotion that's deeper than any Instagram post or love poem. Because in a world obsessed with noise, the avoidant offers presence. In a culture obsessed with performance, they offer reliability. They don't love loudly, but they love deeply. And when they start investing their energy into your life through small, meaningful actions, that's not just affection, that's commitment. What you have to do is learn to translate their language. Stop asking, why don't they say it? And start asking, what are they doing consistently that reveals their care? Because that's where the gold is. That's where the proof lives. That's where the real love story is being written, in the margins, in the background, behind the scenes. So don't wait for the flowers if you've already got the roots. Because sometimes the person who makes your coffee exactly how you like it without asking has already said, I love you 100 times, just never out loud. And that's the final takeaway. If you're looking for love in loud places, you'll miss the one who's been loving you in silence all along. One of the most powerful, overlooked indicators that an avoidant is truly in love is this. They let you see their flaws. Now, I know that might not sound revolutionary. You might think everyone opens up eventually, but let me challenge that belief. Because for someone with an avoidant attachment style, exposing their flaws isn't just uncomfortable, it's terrifying. Vulnerability to them is like standing under a spotlight completely naked while the crowd watches silently, waiting to judge. It's that intense, that visceral, that unsafe. Avoidants survive through control. Control of their image, control of their emotions, control of their environment. So when they let that control slip, even just a little, what you're witnessing isn't weakness, it's intimacy at its highest level. And here's where the psychology kicks in. Avoidants often carry deeply embedded core beliefs that say, if I am fully seen, I will be abandoned. That belief is so central to their emotional DNA that it governs their entire approach to relationships. It's why they seem emotionally distant, why they shut down when conflict arises, why they deflect compliments or push away connection when it starts to feel real. They've trained themselves to stay hidden because history taught them that showing their real self leads to rejection, shame, or loss.
So imagine the internal battle they're fighting when they start to let you in, when they share a painful memory from childhood, when they admit they're struggling, when they reveal something they're deeply insecure about. That's not casual conversation. It's a love confession in disguise. You might be expecting rosés or romantic dinners or passionate I can't live without you declarations, but from an avoidant, the greatest declaration of love might sound more like, I've never told anyone this before. And it matters, because when someone who's spent their life hiding starts letting you see behind the curtain, it means one thing. They trust you with the parts of themselves they've always believed were unlovable. That's not just affection, that's surrender. That's the emotional equivalent of handing you a loaded weapon and saying, I believe you won't use this against me. It's not just trust, it's transformation. Because you have to remember, avoidants don't change quickly, they evolve slowly. quietly, painfully, letting you see their flaws isn't just about opening up. It's about rewriting their internal story. The story that said, if I show who I really am, no one will stay. So when they open up, when they let their guard down, even for a moment, you better understand the magnitude of what's happening. You're not just getting a glimpse into their life. You're being invited into their sanctuary, a place no one else was allowed to go. And how you respond in that moment, that's everything. Because if you shame them, dismiss them, or become emotionally erratic in response, you confirm their worst fear. You validate the story that says, see, I knew it wasn't safe to be seen. And just like that, they'll retreat even deeper. But if you hold that moment with grace, if you listen, stay grounded, and stay present, you break a generational cycle of emotional isolation. And that's the level of impact we're talking about. So stop looking for love in surface level signs. If an avoidant trusts you enough to show you their imperfections, their fears, their messiness, that's the most sacred offering they have. It might not look like love to the world, but to them, it's everything. And that's a shift I want you to take with you. When an avoidant lets you see their flaws, they're not falling apart. They're falling in love.